Welcome back to the Who Are You to Lead Anyway podcast for mastering skills to navigate leadership in life, episode 4. I know a lot of you are put into leadership positions and immediately asked to set goals. What I've learned over my 35-year career is that once the expectation has been set from HR, from your leader, from your organization, and even though everyone might nod affirmatively that they understand what they're supposed to do, many really don't. As leaders file out the door departing the meeting, the whispering starts. What are we supposed to do exactly? Who can we call for help? What can even feel worse is if you're a new leader in a new organization and you've never encountered goal setting in a formal way before. This is why understanding goal setting and how to do it matters, and I'm going to teach you how to do it for yourself in this episode using a simple example and weaving in my own so that you can learn it for yourself. While I'm going to talk to you about setting goals, I invite you to use whatever terminology works for you. It's less about what we call it and more about focusing on what you want to accomplish by making those things visible. We will cover why goals are important, where to begin, breaking things down using the SMART framework, which you may or may not have some experience with, and then we'll finish with a monthly review and recommitment, which in my personal experience is absolutely the secret sauce. So let's dive in. So first things first, why are goals important? Creating goals gives us and our work direction, and when we feel excited about them, it can create a sense of meaning and purpose and keep us motivated. Setting goals helps us stay focused on what matters to us in life by prompting us to think about what is meaningful to us. What is it that we want to pursue that truly satisfies us? Measuring progress along the way can help keep us accountable to ourselves, and by recording our goals on paper, we set in motion the process of becoming the person we want to be. In other words, the future version of ourselves, which can be really exciting. So where to begin? As a newly transitioning leader, if you're working with the SMART framework for the first time, it can feel overwhelming because it's not what you do every day, which is why I created this podcast, to help you navigate this for yourself. I've worked with hundreds of leaders corporately and as a coach to set goals, and I'll bring these two sets of experiences together for you here in this podcast. I'll explain how to break things down and offer you questions to think about your goals a little bit more deeply. All right, so let's break things down. So if you haven't at this moment identified goals that you want, I'll give you a moment to think about what 1 to 3 things do you want to accomplish in the next 30, 60, 90 days that will contribute to your growth as a new leader. There is a great resource that I'm going to link up for you by Forbes, which highlights what every new leader should do in the first 90 days. Out of that, I've taken an example to use here with you today, and that is learning more about the team that you have, getting to know them as individuals, becoming curious about their knowledge, skills, and attributes. And so we'll use that for the purposes of learning how to use this framework in this podcast. And so when you think about what is the outcome I want to have, the S in the framework is for specific. For example, within the next 30 days, I will meet with and get to know each of my team members. Of course, the timing would shift depending on how many you have, and that's completely up to you. The next thing I would offer you to think about is what behaviors specifically do I need to demonstrate consistently to achieve it? It might be taking time to book those one-on-ones with everyone in a short time frame, communicating to the team what you're doing and why, and choosing some consistent questions to ask everyone in order to understand what they're working on and how you can help grow and develop each of them. Then you might ask yourself, in order for me to do this, what do I need to do more of and less of in order to realize this outcome for myself? And a tip I'll give you here, specifically as it relates to meeting your team, is more listening and less talking without any distractions. All right, so let's move into the M in the framework, which is measurable. This is where you define ahead of time what's the evidence that you're making progress by asking yourself, how will you know you've achieved this goal? When working on the measures, it's also good to identify small steps and wins or progress that you can track along the way, and how often you'll check in with yourself, depending on the specifics of the goal. It could be monthly or quarterly, but you get to choose that. All right, let's move to the A in the framework, which is attainable. This is where you ask yourself, can I reasonably accomplish this goal within this time frame? And what are the obstacles that are going to come up, and how will you deal with them? So when I was creating the outline and plans for this podcast, I knew that I could accomplish it in the time that I had set out. The obstacle that I needed to plan for was my own fear. Fear of who would listen and why they would listen, and ultimately, would they find it valuable? And so I decided ahead of time how I would address it. First, I knew that if I never put my work out into the world, nobody would listen. And so I already then knew that it was valuable because I've helped hundreds of people work through this framework already. And so I decided that I would acknowledge my newfound fear because I've never created or recorded a podcast before, and got back to work. In the example we've been working with here, as it relates to you and knowing your people, it's reasonable to meet with everyone. Is it reasonable to meet with everyone on your team in 30 days? If you have a small team, it is. If you have a large team, it may take longer. So your fear might be different from mine. It might be that you've never had one-on-ones before. It could be that you were a part of this team and now you're leading it. And what are they going to think about you? And then that creates a little bit of unsureness for you. The good news is you get to decide ahead of time how you want to deal with it. All right, so let's move to the R in the framework, which is relevant. Some great questions to ask yourself here are, does this goal that you're setting for yourself align with your values and where you see yourself long term? What are the benefits to you? What will this help you do? In other words, what's the goal underneath the goal? And then you might think about, is this a real priority? On a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being low, 5 being extremely important, where does this goal rate? If I use this podcast as an example of a goal, it aligns with my value of making a meaningful difference in the lives of others. At least that's the aim. So many leaders don't have access to a coach, and I want to be the coach in their pocket and in their ear, adding value to them every week. And what this podcast will help me do is create an audience in order to get my work out there. So for you as a new leader, getting to know your people and getting them to know you fosters great working relationships. As a leader, you'll learn how to get your work done with and through others, which will also make this a priority goal for you. My hypothesis is that you want to be successful and that this role isn't the last one you see for yourself. So the goal underneath the goal might be, only you'll know for sure, finding the person on your team that you can groom for the future. And so this brings us to the last in the framework, which is T for time bound. This is the place where you think about, what's the timing you want to achieve this goal in? What should be achieved halfway through? How will I hold myself accountable? And if I say yes to this timing, what am I saying no to? Quite often, this is a piece that a lot of new leaders don't think about because they are new to the role and they want to impress and feel like they need to prove. And so when I set the goal for this podcast, I set the intention last October. I chose January 2023 as my timeline. And in order to make that happen, I said yes to doing the research, learning the components I needed to learn to build my own confidence in becoming a podcast host, and seeking some support from my partner in life for the audio editing, which is absolutely a development area for me. I am just not really great at that. What did I say no to? I said no to engaging a podcast producer, allowing the fears to take me out, doubting the value I was bringing, second guessing, re-recording, getting caught up in launch parties and all of the bells and whistles that I knew would distract me from getting my work into the world, which was a priority for me. And as I recorded this episode, I said no to Sunday brunch with my amazing husband, who's downstairs doing some editing for me. So I do hope that you appreciate it. So for you, you might need to say yes to finding time and space for one-on-ones when you're being pulled in multiple directions by multiple priorities, by multiple people. You might need to say no to responding to emails and texts in the fashion that you've become accustomed to in order to give your undivided attention to your team. Whatever it is for you, I've come to learn that it's really important to ask this of yourself in order to be successful. Let's face it, no one wants to meet with a leader who comes to a room distressed and distracted and on the phone and answering all sorts of notifications and not really being present. There's only one first impression, and this is yours. So now that you've created your SMART goal, I want to offer something that has been a game changer for leaders and clients, and me personally, which is this concept of monthly review and commitment. In other frameworks, you will not see this. But in my experience, this is a step that's often missed by many because the task of completing the, in air quotes, goal setting has been done. But if you really want to exceed, one way of doing this is by keeping your goals in your awareness. One way you can do that is by setting aside time once a month to review and recommit to yourself. This is the time when you look at your plan and you evaluate and you ask yourself honestly, what progress did I make? What got in the way that I didn't plan for? What's my plan to get myself back on track? And then you might ask, as this goes forward in time, what progress do I want to make in the next 30 days? What will get in my way, and what's my plan for that to get back on track? So I realize that this was a lot of information, especially if the SMART framework is new to you. And I can almost guarantee that if you follow this process, you will succeed in achieving whatever specific goals you've set. And with that, I will leave you with this quote by Sammy Davis Jr. You always have two choices, your commitment versus your fear. I hope you choose you over your fear, and I'll see you next week. Make it a great one. Thanks for listening. Your feedback is a gift. Please rate and review with your honest opinion. Subscribe and share with your colleagues, especially if you've worked with me and found value in the work we've done together. Connect with me in my favorite places, LinkedIn and Instagram. My website is Cynthia Jamieson Coach, all lowercase, all one word, .ca. Until next time, make it a great week.